It's over. Labour have won. That was a big declaration from Nigel Farage today. Is he right?
Well, it echoes perhaps what Neil Kinnock was saying just before the 1992 election, when they had a big victory celebration. Do you remember that? You may be too young to remember it.
No, I'm not.
And he called down not the shadow secretaries of state, but the secretaries of state. And it was almost as if the electorate thought, oh, right, OK, so we don't actually count. The ballot itself doesn't matter. What absolute nonsense. And there's a sense in which they did the same to Theresa May in 2017, who called what she felt was going to be a hugely successful election to increase her majority, give her another 5 years with a 20% lead in the polls. And poof, it was just,
she had to form a coalition.
Puff in the wind.
Yeah.
In other words, Farage is wrong on an awful lot of things, Kate. And this is one of the things that he could also be completely wrong about.
Have you met him, Edwina? Have you had any dealings with him in the past?
I think I've been in the same studio as Farage more than once. You always know when he's around. He's very loud, very, very loud. Usually stinking of cigarette smoke or something as well.
Oh,
which
come
I'm
on.
fairly sensitive
I don't think
to.
it's a bad thing. I'd like to think that we'd always know when you're around, Edwina Currie. I don't want to say your voice is loud, but your opinions are strident, and that's why we're with you. So do you think on this point that Nigel Farage is calling this now, do you think that is an insult to democracy? That is an insult to voters to make out like this is won already?
Well, it does rather reflect his lack of knowledge of the voters. I mean, he knows people like himself because, like many people on fringes, he talks only to people like himself, and he's not really having any proper discussion with the main group of people that have supported the Conservative Party for many, many years and who are more central, shall we say, centrist than he is. And of course, what he's got to do is he's got to get himself elected to Parliament. I've lost count. I think this will be number 9.
Yeah,
he's tried to get into Westminster. Well, he's failed 8 times. And here's a prediction for you. I think he'll fail again. And if he fails again, of course, he can't lead anything. You cannot lead a political party in a parliamentary democracy from outside Parliament, as I think he's already found out more than once.
Matthew Stadlen, where are you on this?
Yeah, I think it's slightly desperate stuff from Edwina, and not surprising really, because like all Tories, she's going to be, or most Tories, she's absolutely terrified of today's development. Of course, Nigel Farage doesn't need to win a seat. I mean, he needs to win a seat if he wants to continue to disrupt, if he wants to stage some sort of external takeover of the Tory party. What he doesn't need to do is win this seat in Clacton this time around in order to help destroy the Conservative Party. And let's make no bones about this, he is out to destroy the Tories. His enemy in this election is not Labour. And we don't need Nigel Farage to tell us this election is over. I mean, look at the front page, or the likely front page of tomorrow's Times, along with the Farage story, is this extraordinary new detailed polling by YouGov, which suggests that Labour are now in line to win its biggest majority in history, just shy of Stanley Baldwin's all-time record. Nigel Farage has now entered the fray. This polling came before he decided to stand for a seat and, most importantly, be the leader of Reform UK. So things, if this poll is to be believed, and personally I would take it with a heavy pinch of salt, but if this poll is to be believed, it's going to get even worse for the Conservatives now that Reform UK's real spiritual figurehead is actually entering the fray.
Edwina, come back on that. I mean, a Conservative spokesperson has said Farage was doing exactly what Keir Starmer wants him to do by splitting the Tory vote and giving Labour an even bigger majority. Matthew Stadlen there saying that you're really off the mark with your comments because the Conservatives are running scared at the thought of Nigel Farage.
Well, some Conservatives that I know are thoroughly pleased and delighted that Nigel Farage might get involved. I am not one of them.
Well, as in Farage getting involved with the Conservative Party rather than splitting the Tory vote.
Rather than splitting the vote, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's a mirror image of what happened with Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, that he was the accidental leader to the delight of some of their members, but he turned out to be a real electoral hazard and almost destroyed his party and took it to one of its worst results ever.
The fact that you're making this announcement here and not in Clacton, does that stand as proof that you care more about
I can't let down those millions of people. I simply can't do it. It'd be wrong. So I have decided, I've changed my mind. It's allowed, you know. It's not always a sign of weakness. It could potentially be a sign of strength. So I am going to stand in this election. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier.
I believe you have a candidate already in Clacton, so what's going to happen to him? Thank you.
So I'm coming back as leader of Reform UK, but not just for this election campaign. I'm coming back for the next 5 years. And there is one very simple reason for that. We all know already that the Conservative Party will be in opposition. But it won't be the opposition. They are incapable of it. They've spent most of the last 5 years fighting each other rather than standing up and fighting for the interests of this country.
Mr. Farage, you tried before, you haven't won several.
What I'm really calling for, and what I intend to lead, is a political revolt. Yes, a revolt. A turning of our backs on the political status quo. It doesn't work. Nothing in this country works anymore. The health service doesn't work. The roads don't work. None of our public services are up to scratch. We are in decline. This will only be turned around with boldness. We will only recover our position through economic growth. That will only come when we get away from just half a dozen multinationals dominating the thought of our politicians and allowing real entrepreneurship to flourish. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. The American election is important for this reason. The world is in a worse place, a more dangerous place than it's been at any point since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and even I wasn't born when that happened. Strong American leadership, standing up to bullies, and leading a strong NATO are absolutely vital for our national security. And I believe the world was a much better, safer place with Donald Trump in the White House than it's been with Joe Biden. So that's the context. I'm not saying Britain doesn't matter, far from it. Of course not. I'm British, I'm here. But I do think who wins in America for global safety is absolutely vital. I genuinely do. What I showed 4 years ago in the first video I ever did from the channel was escorting. And what happens here is, once a dinghy, and it can be just 200 yards off the beach at Gravelines or wherever it may be, and the French Navy escort the boat all the way to a 12-mile or median line, whereby they hand over the boats and the people to Border Force or the RNLI. The French Navy are aiding and abetting the criminal trafficking gangs. And actually what they should be doing is, which something the Belgians have done to a certain degree, is they should be taking those boats back to mainland France. We have to make it absolutely clear to the French, we will not accept that continued practice of escorts. I have to say that the Rwanda policy is something that was plucked out of the air by a desperate Conservative government, launched just down the coast at Lyd Airport 2 years and 1 month ago. And Rishi Sunak, of course, has inherited that from Boris Johnson and keeps making promises that planes will go to Rwanda. I am absolutely convinced that the overriding reason for calling a snap early general election is because he knows those planes in July, as he promised, would not be going to Rwanda. They weren't going to go. Rishi can't stop the boats.